Bob, we have another question that's come in from Constellation Pegasus. Thank you, Constellation Pegasus. The question comes as follows. Evidently, Noah's flood didn't happen because we have Sumerian text that is not interrupted. Plus, the population of Sargon couldn't be reached from flood survivors. Is this all we need to debunk Christianity? We have evidence now. So I think, right, we're talking about the flood narratives here. Mm-hmm. And in addition to Constellation Pegasus references to a Sumerian text, we should also throw out, right, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh, we have Greek versions of flood narratives, we have a variety of these. Some that are very close to what we see in the biblical text, some that wander further afar. So, Bob, when we get this collection of texts, do you see this, like Constellation Pegasus is saying, as something that is a disproving or a debunking of this tradition? Or is that an option and we need to think of something else as well? How do we need to look at this plethora of texts?
Sure. Well, let me just come out and say it because it's a free-for-all and I can say things. I can say things here that I couldn't say in other places that I've worked, that I try to say when I do these television interviews, and that sometimes they cut it out and sometimes they let me say. The flood didn't happen. There was no worldwide flood. There was no, and I've written on this publicly in the past, there was no flood that covered the highest point of the earth. And the reason we know this scientifically is there's just not enough water in our system. There's not enough H2O in our atmosphere, on land, under the earth, whatever. There's just not enough water to do that. So there was no worldwide flood. At best, what we're talking about probably is the memory of a regional flood. Mm-hmm. By a regional flood, we're probably talking about the Black Sea, maybe the Mediterranean, but something that was catastrophic. Mm-hmm. And the analogy that I use when I get asked and when I do interviews for these flood documentaries, when they're always looking for, Noah's Ark or whatever, and I say, look, Noah's Ark probably didn't exist. Eric Klein, my colleague Eric Klein at George Washington University, he always talks about if there was an ark, let's just postulate that there was, and it's going to land above the tree line. They don't have any wood up there. The first thing they're going to do is take it apart and either build houses or they're going to burn it, right, for wood because they're freezing up that high. So you wouldn't expect to find it anyway. But aside, there was no flood, there was no ark. This is a story that was adapted from earlier stories like Gilgamesh, and then it was altered so that it reflected the monotheism of Judaism. It's a popular story, and so just full stop. That's where we are on the scientifically. We can demonstrate that there wasn't enough water. You're probably dealing with the memory of a catastrophic flood. And if you look at somebody who lives in New Orleans and you have Hurricane Katrina or Sandy up in New Jersey or Hurricane Beryl that's coming through Texas, if that's the world that you know and you've never left and you see this, you're going to think that this is a world-ending catastrophic flood. I can't imagine what's going on elsewhere. If you don't have the news, right? If you don't have the news telling you this thing's coming, you just assume that this is happening everywhere and you just lost everything.
And you can't see anywhere else. You don't have video footage coming in from another place to show
satellites. Right. Correct. And so the story that you're going to craft and you're going to tell is, boy, God got mad at something and he punished us and he destroyed everything. And that's the story that's going to, and that will get crafted and that will get, altered. And so that's the story that we have. And that's the story that the Israelites got. And they added to it this idea of, the question I always ask is how many animals were on the ark? Was there one pair, male and female, or were there 7 pairs of clean animals? And how do we know what's a clean animal? They don't know yet, but 7 pairs of clean and 1 pair of unclean. And the answer is yes, right? One part of that story in Genesis 6-9 says that there was 1 of each. And in other pairs, it says there was 7 pairs of clean and 1 pair of unclean. And the reason that you have 2 different things, or how long did it rain, right? Or, how long did it flood? The reason that you have 2 different stories is there was 2 different flood traditions that were kind of zipped together in the Hebrew tradition.
Right. And so outside of just these other external ones, right, we're talking about 2 internal biblical traditions that come together on top of these other regions.
So not only do you not have anything in the fossil record. And people say, no, there's fossils on the tops of, yeah, because when the earth was created, it used to be, and then the water receded. So not only do not have anything in the fossil record, nothing scientifically that demonstrates a worldwide flood, but also we have evidence of these stories pre-existing the Bible that were adopted and changed into the Bible. And within the actual canonical Bible that we have, you've got these conflicting tales within the, what did the lions eat in their 150, if there was only 2 of them, right? What did the anteaters eat? While they're, there's certain, some of these animals have to eat a lot of, how did the kangaroos get, so in 3 different ways, you didn't have Noah's Ark. Now, if you look at the Sumerian texts, if you look at these early Akkadian texts, it just continues to demonstrate, based on the evidence that Constellation Pegasus is talking about here. And again, thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you for your question. Based on this evidence, you can see that these stories predated the Bible and that they were adopted. They talk about a barge, a circular barge, and you can see, Irving Finkel at the British Museum always talks about this. They found this text in the basement of the British Museum. And it was basically a circular barge, and they would turn it and bring in the animals, and they saved the animals. And then they let it down, and this is how they repopulated. By the way, what's Noah do? The first thing he gets off the ark is he kills some of them and offers them as something.
And then gets drunk. The fun,
and then he gets...
The fun afterward of Noah's Ark that usually gets scoped when we're doing the felt board version of this in Sunday school, right? We skip over the maybe how many of this and that. Then we also skip over this Noah's drunkenness part and we move right along.
Right. Although, I've been out fishing with my friends and the getting,
he'd been stuck on the boat with the family for too long. He was ready, planted that vineyard.
It was time. It's 9 o'clock somewhere, right? So, as we say back in Fresno. So, fishing and drinking kind of go together.
With some of these competing traditions, though, right? There's the question of, does this disprove one or the other? Is this the memory of inside the competing traditions? It is very interesting to look at them and where they choose to walk different directions. If we're saying they're working off of one central memory and how they choose to frame themselves as humanity or their relationship with their deity, their sense of control or not. It's very nice. I think it's a nice, helpful way to try to get a sense of who are the people saying that they are in these stories. You can go down the let's try to argue which one disproves another, but then you have to pick which one you think is first. And is it because we have the archaeological evidence? Does that prove that it's older than the one that we don't? Not necessarily. So the debunking side of that can get hard, but the value of the plurality of them is great.
Right. That's right. And again, Constellation Pegasus, thank you again for your support and your generosity. You make an excellent point here. And the point is, in addition to the pre-existing texts, in addition to the lack of scientific evidence, geological evidence, in addition to the contradictory texts that we have in the Bible, you're right. There is no gap of human activity.
Right.
So this story, one of the things, the flood story is trying to achieve many things. One of it is an etiology for where do rainbows come from. And I use this example all the time. They would see this color after it would rain, and they would say, where does this come from? And they didn't know about water droplets acting like prisms that refract light. They didn't know that. So they would say, let me tell you a story, right? And again, it's a bow that represents an archer's bow that says, if I ever flood the earth again, may this happen to me. This is God saying.
And that's
just like when he cut the animal and walk through it, So this is God making a promise. I'm not going to do this again.
The bow part of this, the archer part, I think is worth, right, before we can take a pause for everyone to lay that out, that, we're talking about rainbow. In the Hebrew text, it is an archer's bow, right? God hangs God's weapon in the sky as this like threat of violence against myself. It's so, is it a fun, right, nice look at this pretty rainbow in the sky, or this is that sign of divine violence that's now looming over you? Kind of change how you feel about this thing, but continue on.
No, but that's exactly it. It's a promise that I won't do it upon pain of death to me, the deity. It's like when God promises Abram and he makes the covenant with Abram and he takes the animal and he cuts it in half. Abram walks through it, and then that pot of fire kind of floats through it as if to say, you will be cut in half if you break this, but so will I. So God's willing to go through these ceremonies, these rituals in order to do this. And again, Constellation Pegasus, thank you so much for your support. I would agree. Now, again, I always stop short of saying apologists, can't defend it. It's a fatal shot, because you're talking about Judaism and Christianity. You're talking about billions of followers, and you're never going to just say, okay, that's the end of Christianity, right? That's the end of Judah. There are always going to be people who are not only going to be believers in it, because let's just admit, there are many Christians who don't believe in a 6-day creation. There are many Jews, by the way, who don't believe in a 6-day creation. They don't believe in these primordial stories. They know that they're myths. They know that that's part of the received tradition of the people. And they've found a way to say, all right, I believe in the fact that there's a God. I believe in this. This is part of my heritage and my tradition. And I'm going to believe that's how they, but as far as this fundamentalist view, that every word in the Bible is literally true and we can prove it, and the apologist, yes, this is just yet another fatal shot to this.